Thank you, Darren Verde, and welcome veterans and active service military to this Veterans Town Hall. We know we're dealing with an unprecedented crisis here, one that we haven't seen anything near this since 1918 to 1920 with the last pandemic of this magnitude that our country faced. So we know that so many families are suffering right now, whether they're working from home or they lost their jobs, and so many kids are learning from home. My wife is a public school math and science coach here in Osceola County, and I know every day those kids are trying to stay upbeat. Our seniors, so many of them have to stay isolated, being some of the most vulnerable. Our first responders who are on the front lines, including those working at our Orlando VA and VA systems, our active military, and our veterans, of course, are particularly hard hit, which is why we're going to be talking a lot about veteran-specific and active military-specific policies related to COVID-19 today. And many people have lost their jobs, and small businesses like what I used to have when I had my law practice for many years and had to make a payroll twice a month are wondering how to make that next payroll. And we'll have some updates on that. Before I go into anything else, though, I know we're honored to have our director from the VA, Mr. Tim Cook, on the line. Those of you who were just getting on heard us talking back and forth. We've already started developing a wonderful relationship, and Mr. Cook is going to do a great job. He already is for our Orlando VA. So, Mr. Cook, I want to start by giving you an opportunity to say a few words on the work you're doing, and then for the extent that you can stick around for questions, we'd be honored to have you as long as you can, knowing how busy you are.
Oh, no problem at all. For me, this is a great honor. Thank you so much, Carl Soto, for inviting me in to your Zoom call here today. And because it's all focused on veterans issues and active duty issues, those are near and dear to my heart. And so when I think about how important it is for us to continue to recognize our veterans, even during this time of crisis, I can't think of anything more important in my mind right now to still live up to that commitment and make sure that we're here. So we've done a number of things to try to help not only our veterans but also the community. And I can't say enough about my team. This is such a great place. I've been here for just a little over 90 days now, and it seems like just yesterday, and it seems like forever that I've been here. Walking in and coming into the midst of a crisis, but seeing the wonderful things that our team has done, the connections that we've made with the other VA medical centers throughout Florida, Puerto Rico. But also the connections that we've made with the community, for example, at Nemours, with Orlando Health, with Advent Health, with the Department of Health, and the counties. All of this is, in a way, one of the greatest unifiers that you can imagine. And watching my team develop through that time, such a creative group, very passionate about their service. Very caring and worrying about what's going on in the community with our veterans. We're making phone calls every day. We've got our video connect working extremely well now. Our veterans are making their appointments, but doing it virtually, which is something that we've been working hard on, but we didn't see how that was going to really culminate in such a high use. But the care is still being provided. And we're just doing it at a distance now. So things have changed a little bit, and will evolve and develop as the circumstances do, because that is truly our mission.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cook, and you honor us by being here. We know that COVID-19 is affecting all communities, including the veterans community, and so we appreciate the close partnership that we've been able to forge. Mr. Lazert and I had a great relationship as well, and that's been really kind of one of the cornerstones of making sure that we have a collaborative, positive relationship between our congressional delegations. We're here to enable your effort to care for our veterans. I know you're busy, so to the extent you can stick around, feel free.
Oh, sure.
Great.
I'll be happy as long as you need me.
Wonderful. Thanks for being on the line. We're going to go into now a summary of Congress's efforts, knowing that this is an unprecedented crisis. But I did want to start, since we're dealing with so much terrible news, with at least one moment of positive news that is not as much COVID-19 related, but just shows that life still goes on even during these difficult times. I know we have our Veterans Advisory Committee on the phone, and many of you may know already. We have a Veterans Advisory Committee made up of local veterans in and around Florida's congressional district, and they assist us in policy decisions. Another big issue that they work on is our military academies. And we, from the very beginning, have been guided from some local veterans on putting forward a very meritorious process, very rigorous process to help select our nominees. And we're excited to announce that a few of them have been appointed so far, including to West Point. We had 2 appointees already. John Koo, who is from the district, and his family is stationed in South Korea right now. He was just appointed to West Point. And Elias Contagonas of Orlando also got the nod for West Point. Very proud of him. For the Navy, Matthew Perez of Kissimmee was appointed. Many of you may know that was his second time around, so his diligence and refusal to give up has been rewarded by the Naval Academy. And then Haley Stadley of Kissimmee also was appointed to the Naval Academy. We're very proud of her as well. For the Air Force, we found out that Andrew Eisen of Orlando got appointed to the Air Force Academy, and Mr. Stephen Clayton got appointed to the Air Force Preparatory School, which many of you may know gives him a really good shot of being appointed next year. He just became a citizen. His family's from the United Kingdom, and we're certainly really proud of him too. And as you all may know, I called them all personally to let them know and to congratulate them, their teachers, their principal, and others. So even as we're struggling with a terrible pandemic, we're still forging the new leaders of the United States military, and couldn't be more proud of those amazing young people. It was about almost 4 weeks ago now that Congress passed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, otherwise known as the CARES Act. This was the largest response and relief act ever passed by the Congress, $2.2 trillion, which is a massive bill. And it shows we get how serious this is and how much people are hurting. And it was passed nearly unanimously in the House and unanimously in the Senate. So a strong bipartisan bill. I'm going to go over some of the provisions, taking additional time for issues related to veterans and active military specifically. First, $1,200 checks to most Americans, plus $500 per child. That $1,200 is for folks who make $75,000 a year or less. And for those making between $75,000 and $99,000 a year, they will receive a smaller check based upon a sliding scale. Those who earn over $100,000 or more, obviously, won't be eligible. We are focusing on the middle class and those who most desperately need help. So your average family of 4 making under $150,000 will be eligible for $3,400 in stimulus benefits to help through this really difficult time. As an update, we already saw our Social Security beneficiaries, supplemental security income beneficiaries who have direct deposit start receiving their checks last week going into this week. Some of you may have already received that. 99% of our beneficiaries for Social Security and SSI receive their benefits through direct deposit. So 99% of them will be receiving their checks via direct deposit before the end of this month. Very key to get direct deposit. Another great announcement through the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Treasury Department. There was a new plan announced last Friday to get coronavirus stimulus checks to veterans who may have missed out on the initial wave of payments because they don't typically file tax returns and don't yet claim Social Security benefits. So those veterans will receive compensation, who receive compensation and pension benefits from the VA will be sent their checks without additional paperwork or IRS filings. 90-something% of you also receive those via direct deposit. So you'll be able to receive those benefits without any additional paperwork. That's been something that all of us have tried to work through, knowing that it would be burdensome and we'd lose out on some veterans getting their checks more promptly than others. So we should see those checks start going out by the beginning of May via direct deposit. We haven't had a specific timetable listed, but that's what, from hearing from folks around the Capitol, appears to be the likely beginning of that. So keep a lookout, and please, feedback is critical. So as those of you who fit in that category where you're not yet eligible for Social Security benefits, you didn't have to file tax returns, so you would, because of no tax liability, please let us know once you start receiving those payments, because that's going to be critical feedback as we work with the VA and with the Department of Treasury. For all other veterans who aren't receiving Social Security and don't fit in that other category, you're going to want to request direct deposit if you don't already get that for your tax return. And you could do that at Get My Payment app located online from the IRS. Again, it's the Get My Payment app on the IRS website. I strongly urge everyone, and we have so many veteran leaders on the phone, please let others know. If you don't already get your tax return via direct deposit, you're going to want to sign up for direct deposit. Otherwise, we could see folks not getting some of their checks until physical checks until the end of May and early June. I'll tell you, it was Congress's intent to get this out as soon as possible, especially in April and May, as so many people's bills come through. So with this accommodation to be able to sign up for direct deposit, it'll help fulfill this bipartisan intent that we really wanted to get going, knowing that people's bills are still coming in and a lot of people are hurting. I want to talk a little bit about some of the frequently caused delays to look out for. Some folks, they may not get their check for a day or two after it's been sent because their financial institution may not have processed it yet. Another common delay is for those who've been using H&R Block, TurboTax, and other tax preparers. In their past tax return, they may have set up direct deposit accounts for you. So you're going to want to talk to your tax preparers. I know I've used several of those companies. Most of us don't fill out our own tax returns, so that's probably a smart thing. So if you do have those tax preparers, please reach out to them. Others of you may have old bank accounts set up for direct deposit with the IRS that are either no longer open or they're not your primary account. So please make sure to look back at your tax return paperwork to see which bank account is on file. And a lot of you just wouldn't have it on file already because you didn't owe taxes or you didn't receive a refund, and so there was no reason to have direct deposit on file. Again, you're going to want to get to the Get My Payment app on the IRS website. You could also track the status of your payments. My office is here to serve you for these stimulus checks, for any questions that you may have that maybe don't come up over the course of this town hall. That number is 407-452-1171. Again, that's 407-452-1171. And we're here to help out. In the CARES Act, once the payment's sent, we've required the IRS, after 15 days of sending the payment, to send a mail notice of payment to your last known address describing the method by which the payment was made, the amount of the payment, and a phone number for the appropriate point of contact at the IRS to report any failure to receive the money. So last resort, you'll be getting that notice, and that should give you a point of contact. We at our congressional office have a point of contact. I will tell you they are inundated, so we're working as best we can with our overwhelmed IRS colleagues to get through a lot of these questions. But if all else fails, you'll get an individual contact. And of course, if you live in Florida's 9th Congressional District, we can continue to work with that point of contact should you not receive your payment. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the $600 federal unemployment benefit that Congress passed. This is a benefit of $600 per week for up to 4 months, and it's on top of the $275 per week state benefit for up to 12 weeks. And for the $600 federal benefit, you qualify if you're an employee who lost your job, if you're an employee who lost hours, or if you're an independent contractor, such as many folks who work as barbers or hairdressers, or folks who work as Uber or Lyft drivers. I know a lot of our veterans do some moonlighting, doing part-time work. You would qualify for this federal benefit. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say and recognize that the website has been a disaster. Florida's been slowest to deliver benefits in all 50 states. This is a terrible disgrace, and let me talk about what we're doing to help fix it. We sent them $29 million of federal funds from the U.S. Department of Labor about 2.5 weeks ago to help fix the system. They put in 72 new servers, have 3 new call centers they've added, and a new paper application. What's done is done. Now we just have to fix this. A lot of our state legislators are overwhelmed with these cases. State House members, state senators, and I was both a state House member and state senator at one time. You only get 2 staffers as a state House member, 3 staffers as a state senator, so I get how many of them are overwhelmed. So I, along with many of our other members of our congressional delegation, have agreed as of this past week to start taking these state unemployment cases, knowing that it's all hands on deck. Before, it was clearly something that was a state issue as far as the cases, but in conjunction with the Department of Economic Opportunity, Florida's state agency related to the unemployment benefits, we've all agreed that the congressional offices will also be working on these cases. And we, of course, have 17, 16, 18 staff members per office. So we're going to be able to really help with those things. I want to go through some of they've put the Department of Management Services Secretary, Mr. Satter, on the case for the fledgling system. He's been forthcoming on a bunch of issues that with the congressional delegation on issues that have been kind of open-ended until now, and we applaud that candidness. So a couple issues that we've just found out about. One, retroactivity. The state is, if they haven't already over the last day or so, they will announce they're going to agree to retroactivity as of the date of the application, particularly because the website's been plagued with issues. People shouldn't be penalized for the issues with the website or with getting dropped from phone calls. But there will be some element of proof to that. So you're really going to want to work with our offices and our state offices to make sure that your retroactivity is right. It will not be retroactivity as of the date of the job loss, unfortunately. That's something that we certainly support, but we are where we're at, which is there's going to be at least some retroactivity. Second, the biweekly job search has been waived for everyone. Obviously, right now, with 26.5 million Americans unemployed right now, there aren't a lot of places hiring other than in the healthcare industry, and many of those require certain degrees. We know that it's going to be difficult in the short term for people to continue to try to look for work every 2 weeks. So they waived that. We applaud them for that. In addition, we're getting a status this week, but one of the other things that was delayed is they hadn't put together their application for self-employed individuals, for independent contractors, gig workers like we talked about. I will look through my notes again to give everybody a continual update, but as of yesterday, there hadn't been new applications out. We really have been pushing them to get this out because it's a 4-month federal benefit that could time out, so we could start losing that 4 months of eligibility. should there be more delay. And we're going to continue to work with the governor and the state legislature to get that up and running. It may have been open as of this morning, but I hadn't seen anything yet. We'll continue to keep you posted. Of course, this is a perfect reason to either sign up for our email list, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, or participate in our many teleconferences so you can get the most up-to-date information. Going on to the small business loan programs, which I know a lot of folks have been focusing on. There's a lot of veterans who, when they're out of the service, have gone into business and gone on their own into small businesses. So we know this is a near and dear issue. We initially allocated $367 billion for loan programs for small businesses. This included $10,000 emergency grants and additional funding for emergency loans, and of course the foundational new program, the Paycheck Protection Program, where we allocated $349 billion. We know the small businesses are hurting, and we want to get this money out on the street as quick as possible because most of it, 75% of it, has to be used to keep employees. The whole reason we're helping out small businesses is not only because they're the lifeblood of the economy, but to keep Americans, including our Central Floridians, employed and on the job. So we all know the funds got tapped out in 11 days. I mean, it got out on the street quickly, and there were some positives and some inequities, some of which we were able to address in this recent legislation that I'll go into more later. Florida's businesses, we had 88,997 Florida businesses, small businesses receive these Paycheck Protection Program loans. Again, that's 88,997. So many small businesses for a total of $17.8 billion. So that's a lot of people that will be employed with that funding. Of course, the way the program works, you apply with your local bank or credit union, and you have to show what your payroll is, and you could apply for a loan of up to 2.5 times your payroll. And if you use 75% of that for your employees, you get the amount waived by the federal government. If you keep all your employees, and then if you keep 90% or 80%, it dips down a little bit. And overall, you have to use 75% of the funds for employees. So we had a lot of folks receive them. The underside of that is that we had a lot of small businesses who didn't, particularly the smallest of businesses. We saw some inequities of some national restaurant chains and hotel chains, which we won't be naming here, but I'm sure a lot of you have read in the paper, who have access to the capital markets, like stock markets and equity and bonds. So that was kind of a loophole that was unfortunate, and many of them are now giving them back. The Treasury finally came out with a rule that said because you have to certify that you needed these loans, it's unlikely that any company who is registered on the stock exchange would be able to prove that. And of course, we have a large business fund for the biggest businesses, which we'll go into briefly in a minute. So you had some national chains return the money. We appreciate that because this is for our smallest businesses. But we still know that your relationship with a banker's or your credit union or others are going to be probably closer if you're a 400-person small business. And remember, up to 500 employees or less qualify versus a 4-person small business. So we saw a lot of the smallest mom and pop shops be left behind. And we also saw some of the largest of banks, they had caps on their the amount of loans they'd lend. Wells Fargo had a $10 billion cap because of the penalty they had from an account scandal issue a while back. Bank of America self-imposed a $10 billion cap. We are working with them. Now the Federal Reserve will buy those loans off of them. So those caps will be replenished. We'll go into it a little more when I go into the new bill we just voted on. But the beauty of it is we've just replenished that program and have a set aside of $60 billion for our smallest businesses through credit unions and community banks set aside to help out veteran-owned, women-owned, and minority-owned businesses. We'll go into a little more detail later, but that was a huge win for the smallest of businesses, and veteran businesses were top of mind and uttered by name by so many members on both sides of the aisle. It would make you proud to hear the debate yesterday, at least that part. And it was passed nearly unanimously. So huge support for the extension package. There's a $500 billion lending fund that we have an oversight committee for, and that's to help some of our largest of businesses in states and cities and counties. The only major reform, in addition to making sure we have the proper oversight, is we only have one county that can apply for it. Miami-Dade is the only county big enough, being over 2 million people as a county, and then we have no city over 1 million. So we're going to fight for reforms on that. In addition, we banned having executive bonuses, share buybacks, and excessive dividends, knowing that these were issues that happened during the American Investment Act during the Great Recession. So we learned from the mistakes of the past to avoid abuses. Obviously, our hospitals are on the front lines. We're going to talk VA specific in a few minutes, but generally for our other hospitals who are serving Central Florida, there's $130 billion to hospitals. The first $30 billion got released 2 Fridays ago. $2.2 billion went to 22,000 providers here in Florida. Since it's based upon fee-for-service, we do pretty well under that formula, but we have a lot of Medicare Advantage, Medicaid program revenue. So when they roll out the next round, we should do even better. And we certainly appreciate our healthcare professionals, whether it's at the VA hospital leading the charge with our veterans, or at Osceola Regional and Orlando Health and Advent Health and Baycare and so many others that are really stepping up. There's $150 billion for state and local stimulus funds as well. Really critical. I served in the state legislature. We use $3 to $4 billion a year from about 2008 to 2011 to help plug in our Florida budgets. These help keep teachers, cops, firefighters on the job. So important. A lot of this flows down to local governments. So really excited that we'll see $12 billion go down to the state of Florida, 8.3 billion for state and local budgets. 4.6 billion of that will go specifically to the state, and then another 3.7 billion will go to specific state programs, for a total of over $8 billion to plug in the budget in the state. We know we've had some major gains in teacher pay, in the Sadowski Fund for affordable housing, an issue near and dear to our veterans. So it's very important that we be able to keep those gains as best we can. We also got local grants back in the district, community development block grants and other COVID-related grants. Kissimmee got $426,000. Orlando got $2.5 million. St. Cloud got $198,000. Polk County received $3.2 million. Osceola County received $936,000. And Orange County received $2.1 million for their community development block grants and COVID response. That money can be used for affordable housing, which a lot of them have been using, rental assistance in particular, and of course can go to COVID response, first responders, hazard pay, and other issues at the discretion of our local officials. There has been a gap for some of our smaller cities who usually receive community development block grants, including many cities in Polk County. That's something we're working on for the CARES 2 package that we eventually should see by the end of May, especially cities like Haines City and Winter Haven and Lake Wales, which contribute substantially to the response of COVID-19 in Polk County. Very important that those cities get assistance. We added another $48.9 billion for food assistance and to help our farmers. Our district has the top citrus and cattle producing counties in the state of Osceola and Polk County respectively. So obviously this is huge for our farmers. And of course, so many people are in need of food assistance right now. We have been working with Second Harvest and with Feeding Tampa Bay. They receive a lot of this money, and then they help fund and provide food for the local food pantries across Florida's 9th congressional district. In addition, this food assistance goes to the school breakfast and lunch programs. We're on a summer waiver. Whether it's our schools or our food banks, they have stepped up in a huge way, as has the community. I saw in a local telethon the other day, one of our local stations, West 2, raised over $1 million in a day for Second Harvest. So we know we got to continue to step up. We've signed on to waivers for able-bodied adults without children. Many of them are just returning veterans who are struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Very important that we get that waiver in place, and we'll continue to work with those communities. As far as education, there was $30 billion for an education stabilization fund. Half of that goes to our K through 12 system, half of it to higher ed. So important because a lot of our college students are left out because dependents 17 and 18 years old don't qualify for the $500 stimulus check. If they haven't had any job history, they won't get a stimulus check, and they don't qualify for unemployment. So we fill the gap with half this money going to higher ed, and then for the other, it's K through 12 to help them with distance learning and coronavirus response. Our teachers are working overtime. I can tell you from at the Soto residence with Mrs. Soto, working pretty darn hard every day. UCF just got $51.07 million to help out. Valencia got $27.68 million, and Polk State got $6.15 million. Half that money has to go to student relief. It could go to tuition or books, to technology, to healthcare, housing, or childcare. So we're going to continue to work on those issues with our local colleges. We had teleconferences with Valencia and Polk State where we got to speak with students and with administrators and teachers. There's 6 months forbearance on student loans. I know many of you are fortunate enough, having earned through your service VA benefits. You may not have student loans, but others who went above and beyond those benefits, you may. And so 6 months in forbearance should help out. $48.5 billion for transportation and housing. Very critical for Lynx and for Citrus Connection, for Sunrail and Amtrak. I know that we're continuing to work with our VA to get better access to our VA hospitals from our bus routes. That's something we're going to continue to work on. The rest of my time, I want to focus on just specifically what's affecting U.S. military, National Guard, as well as VA hospital relief and funding. We know it's been a tough time. Particularly our Navy has been hard hit by the COVID-19 issues. The USS Theodore Roosevelt had particularly hard hit with 585 positive COVID-19 sailors out of the over 4,000 that were tested. They have been evacuated and are being treated. Another great work by our VA. I believe they're in Guam right now, being treated at the VA there. And just today, we saw that guided missile destroyer Kidd had one sailor flown off the ship for COVID treatment, an additional 17 on the ship test positive. We know all of our military are put in a vulnerable position, and our National Guard, who are helping directly with the relief efforts. So we're going to continue to make sure that they have all of the funding they needed. So that $10 billion for U.S. military, National Guard readiness and assistance will go a long way. We also made sure to provide $19.57 billion to help care for our service members and veterans. So that $10 billion is for the needs for their operations, but we added another $19.57 billion healthcare specific, because we know this is a pandemic, and we need to make sure that Director Cook and our VA hospitals across Central Florida and across the nation are well funded. We know that Orlando, like other areas, have been hit by COVID-19. We've had 84 positive cases related to the Orlando VA system, and I really am impressed. We've saved the vast majority of them, And I want to thank you, Director Cook, for your diligence. We know no one's going to be immune, whether it's our healthcare professionals in our local hospitals or our VA, but I know you deeply care about that. So whether it's the veterans or the employees who are affected by it, I want to personally thank you and your staff for working on this. None of this is easy. I know you may want to have additional comments on how the VA is dealing with this, and then we'll go into our statewide numbers. But please, if you'd like to talk a little bit about some of the responses and the good work you all have been doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Congressman. And, you know, it has been challenging. And I think out of the 84 that you mentioned, the distinction, we have had 56 of those were veterans, and 27 of those were our employees, and we had one humanitarian, well, very early on when this first began, that we were able to help. And you know, having a system that is well established, like the VA, gives us a great advantage to be able to move quickly. And you think, well, how that seems a little contradictory when you think about how the government works in some cases, but because we have a very large system, we're able to move resources very quickly. And so we established screening points very early in the process. We established masking of all of our employees and also our veterans very early on. And I think that had a lot to do with helping us keep the numbers down as about as low as we could possibly go. And the majority of those were not hospitalized. They were quarantined at home. So we're very fortunate in a way to be able to allow them to heal and to, in fact, many of the employees are back to work now after having gone through the quarantine period. And so we welcome them back. And so it's been great to see. And several of the veterans that were tested positive, that stayed with us, we've actually successfully sent home as well.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for your transparency. I know the VA has been one of the leads on being transparent. We know none of this is easy. But like when we're in the battlefield, transparency of how it's affecting our active military and veterans is so important. We saw TSA now announcing their numbers. The state of Florida has been announcing their numbers daily for a few weeks now. So thank you for your hard work and for your transparency and all this. Our veterans, they are tough. They can handle the news, but they want to be informed, and this is keeping them informed. So thank you for that. Overall in Florida, we've had 239 positive cases of veterans. Unfortunately, 11 veteran deaths overall, 3 of those in the Central Florida area, and we mourn for them. And we will do, as we get back into the flattening the curve and being able to join together in person again. I know I'm planning on doing some veterans events that recognize the veterans that we lost this year, both through natural causes and through COVID. Some of the other issues we're working on, we just co-sponsored the Help Our Heroes Access Medicine Act. That would temporarily waive TRICARE copays to ensure military retirees and families can affordably access their prescription drugs and practice social distancing. We know that's been a feedback that we've received from several of you about the TRICARE copays. So we appreciate that feedback and are on the bill. Mr. Cook, I did want to ask you, because you had mentioned already the telemedicine.
Yep.
You had mentioned some of the successes of it. Do you want to go into a little more detail? I know we've given some additional discretion, and you've given me a good briefing about how that's working out.
Well, you know, in general circumstance, we have about 20,000 veterans that we serve throughout Central Florida. And that's the second busiest VA. We're the second busiest VA in the entire country, right behind North Florida, South Georgia.
Incredible.
And so we have a vast population of all of the counties in our surrounding area, all the way up to Daytona, and beyond out to Vieira and down to Palm Bay, and then certainly Osceola and counties to the southwest. But we serve a very, very large area in addition to Orange County and where Lake Nona is. And what we've done is really enhance our ability to have all of our providers be part of a system, and having a robust video connection system that allows them to talk not only from the hospital but also at home. So if we have providers even working at home, they can speak with their veterans and their team. I've heard so many good stories, even from our team up in Delta, where they had a veteran who spoke with the mental health provider, and he says, if you guys weren't calling me, I don't know what I would do. His PTSD has been helped tremendously by the number of additional calls that we've been able to make and stay connected. We've done a lot of our care virtually. Now, you can't do everything virtually, but what we're finding is that through that steady conversation, we're allowing the veterans to express how they're feeling. That kind of conversation is priceless. So, and if we had 85% of our visits were face-to-face, whether that be a mental health visit or a primary care visit or a specialty visit, if all of those visits were taking place, 85 to 90% of those were done that way. Now it's just the opposite. We're doing 85% of the visits that we have right now are virtual. We're preparing for, and we've always started preparing for, the inevitable return of veterans to come into face-to-face appointments. There are certain things you just can't do over the phone. There's no virtual colonoscopies, and there's no virtual vascular surgeries. So we know that there's a lot to be done. But even things like virtual physical therapy. I got to participate in a virtual physical therapy appointment with a veteran who now didn't have to drive our direction. He sat right in his living room, and the physical therapist was there giving him instructions just as we were in the room. It was really remarkable, and he was so thankful that we had the technology to do it. So just an example.
Sure. Well, thanks for that update. I'm sure there'll be ways we can advance that. In addition, we signed a letter to congressional leadership to support healthcare providers working in VA, DOD, and FEMA to make sure the great people who work at the VA, including a lot of our brothers and sisters in AFGE, have the funding they need. The Florida Department of Veterans Affairs also has teamed up with the American Legion for a COVID-19 Project Vet Relief Fund. So reach out to Florida Department of Veteran Affairs or through our office should you or other veterans that you know need assistance. And I want to briefly talk about the extension. We're going to take some questions. The new CARES Phase 3.5 bill that we just passed, that I just voted on yesterday, has $370 billion in new small business assistance. So a lot of those veteran-owned businesses that are still in the queue, they should be able to get their funding from this new round. And reforming the issues that went on before, we talked about it briefly already, $60 billion of the $310 billion going to the Paycheck Protection Fund has to go through small banks, credit unions, and community development finance institutions to ensure that our small businesses, including veterans, women, and minority-owned businesses, aren't left behind. And many of them, they have that as their mission. So any community development financial institutions or other credit unions or small community banks that specialize in veterans, they're going to have money set aside to help. So I strongly encourage you to work with them. There's another $50 billion for SBA disaster loans, which have been very popular and a little easier to qualify for. And then $10 billion for SBA disaster grants, also a big issue going on. Then, of course, we got $75 billion for hospitals, knowing that they're on the front lines, or nursing homes or hospitals or federally qualified clinics. And then $25 billion for testing. This has been one of the keys to our economic freedom, is getting testing back up and running. So we're excited to finally get that, as well as a national strategic testing policy, which is critical because people need some leadership and guidance from the federal level. With that, I want to turn it over to questions. I know there was a lot of information and I know that a lot of you wanted to hear from Director Cook, and we certainly appreciate those comments. So let's take some questions, Darren Verde, from here.
All right, Congressman, we have 3 questions that have come in privately through the chat. I've only got 1 name on them, so I'll ask
Great.
the 2 general ones first. There's a clarification. Part-time workers, such as like people that work part-time at Disney, are they eligible for the federal $600 per week for furloughed employees?
The answer is yes, they are eligible for the federal benefit. They would not be eligible for the state benefit as far as my understanding is. So you're going to want to apply. It's the same application and you would be eligible. And we had you all, including so many furloughed employees, in mind when we passed that new federal benefit.
Okay. The second question is if a disabled vet does not have direct deposit, how can they receive a secure payment?
So they're going to want to first, if you can, go to Get My Payment app on the IRS website and request direct deposit. Again, that's the Get My Payment app on the IRS website. You could also see those links through my website, www.soto.house.gov, soto.house.gov, and you should see links there to the IRS. If not, then it will be sent via the U.S. Postal Service to your last known address, which will likely be your residence. So you have that option. Certainly our postal service is secure already, but if you wanted to get it more quickly, and we're urging you to do so, request it over the app. And I'm going to move this camera over because my iPad is running out of juice. So please continue.
Sure. Third question is actually a compliment from Jorge Muela. He wants to thank you personally. Jorge, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. So go ahead and ask your question. And then after you, I think that we have Ed Rodriguez from FDAX that wanted to say something as well.
Great.
All right. So thank you, Congressman, for having us here today. I just wanted to thank you personally for your support and what you provided to veterans on extending the payments from the post 9/11 GI Bill, where we get the funding for housing, and that greatly alleviates some of the tensions and anxieties that you have for how to get by. To have that reduced would have been really bad.
Well, we know, having heard your story before during some of our town halls, going back to duty and then suffering injury while serving our country, we want to make sure those who have stepped up are taken care of. It takes sacrifice beyond my even personal knowledge for all of you who've served to go and defend our country. So we have to have your backs, and it's my honor to do so, Mr. Mejia, and we appreciate you working with the advisory committee too.
Okay.
Thank you, Congressman.
It's our pleasure. Thanks for being on the phone. Mr. Rodriguez, you have the floor.
You want to continue?
Congressman. Thank you for having us, Congressman. I'm Ed Rodriguez. I'm the Veterans Affairs Director for Commissioner Nikki Fried. As you can imagine, we're very busy with agriculture and consumer protection right now during this COVID crisis. But thank you for all the work that you're doing in regards to veterans. We've been paying attention to your town halls. They're doing probably 2 or 3 times more than anyone else. So we appreciate all that effort. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat box if any of you guys want to reach out to me on any veterans issues that we can help with. But thank you, Congressman, for having us and for all the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, and thanks for what our Commissioner Nikki Fried is doing, not only to help feed so many across Florida, but work with our farmers as well. Half of the food that is brought in through the SNAP program is Florida grown. I'm really proud of that fact. In addition, we know that veterans often are targeted for price gouging and consumer scams because of the robust benefits that you all have earned that we have made sure are available to you. You'll have sometimes folks who try to take advantage of that. So I encourage you all to make sure that if something doesn't sit right, you're welcome to contact our office. And of course, our Commissioner, Nikki Fried, has consumer protection under her purview. So you're going to want to reach out to her, and also our Attorney General works on those issues. So please keep us posted on those things. And I know we're working to keep everybody safe too. With that, let's take another question or comment.
So if you're on the phone, you can press *6 to unmute yourself, or you can just click up here in the right-hand corner of your Zoom chat box to unmute yourself. Just keep in mind that you want to state who you are and maybe an organization that you're representing, and then mute yourself right after your question. You can also type it in the chat box if you'd like.
I see Mike is unmuted. Mr. Kepner, please.
Good afternoon, Congressman. Thank you so much. I'll echo what Jorge said about the GI Bill and extending that through the end of this year. And I'll just always ask everyone to be aware that as we go into the spring semester, there may need to be an extension for that based on, kind of what that looks like for veterans. Because taking that 50% cut in your housing allowance is significant for some folks. So I did have a question for you in regards to the student services part of what higher education got. I look at this always from two different sides, and all I would ask is that as we go into looking at the language of those credit and continuing education students.
Mike, after you said the language of, you broke up a second. Can you repeat just the last sentence?
Okay, sir. Well, we did the higher education piece of it. The language of it, I would just ask that we always consider both credit, non-credit, and continuing education students when we allocate funds, because sometimes we leave the continuing education folks behind. So just something for us to think about.
Sure. So my understanding is it should apply to the vast majority of students enrolled in places like Valencia and UCF and Polk State, but it also applies to for-profit and nonprofit colleges. So I'm going to have my staff look into what training and workforce training higher institutions of learning in and around the district still don't qualify. Is there any in particular that come to mind, Mike? Because that would be a help.
Well, sure. I'll shoot Shasta a note. We're going through ours right now. So I'll shoot your team a note as we go through it and kind of let them know where I think we stand. Okay.
Well, that'd be helpful. But I know we, with the idea that we wanted it to be broadly helpful to many institutions, we included both the government type public schools like universities and colleges and private and nonprofit. So we'll get you the full range of folks who do apply, and to the extent that we're leaving some veterans and institutions behind, I'm certainly open-minded to that. So thanks for that suggestion, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
I believe we had another question or comment.
Yeah, it looks like we have a 239 area code number that is unmuted.
Yeah, I had a question as to when we might be able to get the antibody test. That the VA has a lot of testing capability there at the Orlando VA. Can we count on maybe in the next couple of weeks being able to go in there and see if we've already had the infection and recovered and have the antibodies, so some of us can move forward?
Great question. Let's just talk nationally first, and then I'm going to pass on to Mr. Cook, Director Cook as well. We see on an individual match-to-match basis, local hospitals starting to do that. We saw a national story just the other day of an Orlando man with a large family who had someone come down from Chicago who was a match and saved his life. So we know the antibodies, while we're working on a vaccine, which could take upwards of a year plus, and while one treatment is in stage 2 phase of FDA and 2 are in phase 1, that the antibodies are a big promise. So Director Cook, if you're still on the line, any thoughts on antibody use at the Orlando VA?
Sure. You know, we're always trying to be on the front edge of everything that is going on within the scientific community. There is discussion about the antibody testing on a national level. Currently, we have our the testing that we're performing right now is the standardized test that you've seen, the Abbott testing. But we've also have a Cepheid testing right now, which is more specifically related to the virus itself and understanding whether or not somebody has the virus. So when the antibody tests are available, I am absolutely sure that the VA will be first in line to proceed ahead. But we're going to be doing that as a collective unit across the VA.
And that brings up a great issue. Darren Verde, if you wouldn't mind writing a note on that, we can look at as we get to the CARES 2 package, or even among existing funding, to see what we can do to help get Director Cook and other VA hospitals across the nation the funding they need and work together to get this up and running as soon as we can. So thanks for that suggestion, and that brings up a great policy issue to start working on. We have time for at least one more question or comment.
So, Dr. Soto, Congressman Soto, what I'd wanted to say too, you know, we've been very fortunate here as to receive a lot of support financially and directly with regard to our ability to perform our testing. So we're considered to be ourselves very, very fortunate. We're also doing the testing not only for Orlando, we're doing the testing for West Palm Beach, Miami, Puerto Rico, and even the local Department of Health to help with our first responder. We're doing testing for the State Veterans Home in Daytona, and also several of the local nursing homes that might need help. And so the resource that we have is really strictly not limited only. It is primarily there for our veterans, but it's also a part of a larger community response. So we've been pushing to make sure that the folks in the area know that we're also here to help them too.
Well, thanks for that. You all are stepping up well above your region, and that's we certainly appreciate that. We'll take one last question or comment, and then we'll end up closing. Darren Verde, do you have another question or comment?
I'm looking. I don't see anybody in the chat box, but does anybody else have a question? Go ahead and press *6 on your phone, or just unmute yourself in the corner right here. Going once.
I think we see Mr. Robinson is unmuted. You're on, sir.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I want to thank you for everything you're doing, Congressman Soto, and continue to do for our veterans community, as well as our new director, Timothy Cook. I'm out here in the community and I see a lot of things, and you know, having boots on the ground, I see how what you're doing is affecting our community out here, and I try to go ahead and give that information to as many people as I can, because some people have limited access to the information they get. But with that being said, I applaud what you're doing. Anything I can continue to support you on and be an assistance to, please call on me. I appreciate everything you're doing.
Both being on the advisory committee, being a veteran, and also working with hospice, I know there's a lot of roles for you to help play, Fred, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on those issues. I'm going to briefly just close by saying this Facebook Live event, Zoom event, is being recorded, so there will be a copy of the video on our Facebook page. We encourage you to share it with other veterans, knowing that not everybody can be on the line at any given time, so they can watch it during their leisure. And we will continue to have teleconferences daily with various different communities affected. And we know with the COVID-19 virus, so many people are hurting, and the veterans community certainly is feeling it, including so many others. So we're going to continue to fight for you all, serve those who've served. And I wanted to give the privilege to Director Cook to have the last word before we close.
Well, thank you, Congressman. You know, it is a privilege to serve. You know, I know that each and every day that our team walks through our doors, whether we're here to see our veterans face to face or by phone or video, we're going to continue that commitment. We're going to be committed to our recovery process as we move into our next phase to make sure that we're coming back safely, that we're going to re-enter and merge our operations with our veterans and make sure that they are and absolutely are happy and trusting to come back and see us. So thank you very much for the opportunity today.
We're honored to have you. We're extremely honored to have all of our veterans on the line. Thank you for your service. And please share this so that we can spread the word to all our veterans about the opportunities out there. Be safe and healthy, everyone, and God bless you all. This concludes our town hall.
God bless and be safe, everyone.
Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Roger that.